No matter how you slice it, Age of Empires 4 is a very safe game. It does work and can be fun to play, but it lacks that elusive more. It played the genre safe and is currently stagnating at 4K players, with a lot of the pro scene returning to the games that they played before. But what if these companies didn't play it safe and really tried to innovate the genre? What would that look like? I've been doing a lot of research on this topic, and here are a couple of elements that I could see contributing to the success of the next RTS. 1. Anime. Do I even need to say more? Even if you yourself don't like anime, you can't deny that the weebs would throw money at it. More importantly, there just aren't any anime RTSs out there. For some reason, Japan just hasn't made any RTS games, which is quite surprising when you consider how infamous some JRPG titles are with their complex systems, something I imagine a lot of people would enjoy the idea of being integrated into an RTS. Also, coming from my experience doing research in the isekai sphere for one of my own projects, most successful isekai come from the idea of taking your favorite game and writing a story about that concept, and there are several titles that would fit right at home as an RTS. The most explicitly RTS title I know of is Her Majesty's Swarm, which is effectively a Zerg isekai. I haven't gotten too far into it though, mainly because it's got a lot of bugs in it. In any case, this is definitely on my list for instant success material. 2. Paradox games. I want to focus on Hearts of Iron 4 here because I feel like it's the most relevant to my purposes. Hoi 4 is very popular, with creators like Bokoen and Isoro Productions pulling in strong viewerships among many others. The active player base is also far healthier than Age of Empires 4. There are plenty of things that could make Hoi 4 a more popular game than AoE 4, but let's focus on the sheer amount of systems that Hoi 4 has that AoE 4 just doesn't. Attrition, logistics, oil upkeep, stability, war support, generals and field marshals, military industrial complexes, while also playing on the literal world map. Age of Empires just can't compete with that level of realism precisely because it stuck to the tenets of the genre established in the late 90s. So if the genre can't rely on realism, then it has to start relying on art direction. I'll touch on that in a minute, but returning to Hoi 4, I think it's safe to say that it's not exactly a well-optimized game, just because of how many countries that have to be represented. There are a lot of systems here that really do require a lot of thought to use effectively, and the amount of customization actually introduces a lot of noob traps that can ultimately ruin a playthrough. It also has a problem with ultra late game goals, where you ultimately try to conquer the rest of the plan for the next 10 in-game years just because that's all that's left. That's why I'd say that any game that ultimately manages to streamline and make the game actually fun to play has a decent chance at making it. 3. Thematic integration. Virgins argue over whether story or gameplay is more important to a game. Headshot knows that gameplay is story and story is gameplay. This is what is known as the Luda narrative, or the story that the play symbolizes. FromSoft really are masters of the craft here. They managed to get George R.R. Martin onto Elden Ring, which has a lot of deserved praise going around. In Bloodborne, for example, your two major occurrences are what the entire story is about. Basically, it's either the blood-healing church, or the pursuit of eldritch truth. Of course, I don't think every game can afford to go that far with a resource system. Food, for example, is an important resource because without it people starve. That's pretty easy for people to understand. Population caps, however, I feel like they're mostly there to force you to fight. After all, that's how many units you're allowed to field, right? Well, if those houses are destroyed, then what happens to the now homeless populations? Obviously, there's a Brood Wars EVP matchup that revolves around Corsairs trying to snipe overlords, but that might be a bit too hard to replicate. Population supply, as it stands, is just kind of an old system without much function outside of being the arbitrary factor that developers are forcing on players. But what if food wasn't just a one-time cost? What if units ate food? You could apply the same logic to things like vehicles actually costing fuel, or mages using magic, either from their own pool or a global pool, like how Company of Heroes uses munitions. There's also the question of what themes an RTS could even talk about in the first place, which is a bit too complicated for this video. If you'd like to see that, please press the like button. 4. Chill. When I was a kid, I really loved Age of Mythology. It was a very chill time, and I was able to spam just whatever units I wanted at the enemy, and that was a lot of fun. Then came StarCraft 2 with the Husky HD beta tournament, and I learned a lot more about how people really played the game competitively. My micro isn't half bad, but I'm quite rusty and I'm among the players who prefers having an army instead of getting 6-balled. While I think this makes for interesting professional play, I definitely think that 4 or 6 minutes attacks are just too fast to actually be enjoyable. This is ultimately why I enjoy Age of Empires 2 the most, because it fits in with my personal pace. There are obviously people who don't want something that slow, but I'd wager that most people might not even want that kind of pressure at all. So instead of asking what the precise timing of a game should be, it might be a better idea to come up with a scenario or setting that would allow these kinds of players to chill for the first 20 minutes or so. While I feel like the StarCraft crowd might be looking at big game hunters, I want to talk about Forest Nothing. Forest Nothing is a custom map in Age of Empires 2 with a very simple premise. Nothing but forests. You spend the first 10 minutes of this game trying to chop enough space to plant a farm. You spend another 10 in order to get to feudal. It's actually quite a relaxing time, although I do feel like Age of Empires really wasn't designed for this. Its sister game, Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, might be more interesting here, what with air being a factor alongside quote-unquote tanks being trash units. However, I can definitely see a game like this happening underground, like a machine mining intelligence coming online only to find out that it's several miles beneath the surface, and deciding to continue with what it does best, mine. And then it comes across another mining intelligence, and believing it to be from another company, declares war. It could be an interesting side project. 5. Genre mixing. While this is probably blasphemy to actually talk about, there has always been a desire to branch the genre out. While RTS FPS hybrids are the most abominable of this trend, I just want to highlight a different genre to get another picture of this concept. Let's talk about ARPGs. This includes Diablo, Path of Exile, and Grim Dawn. One common build archetype are minion builds, where you control a lot of minions. The connection to RTS games here is self-evident. There's a non-zero chance that Diablo influenced the development of Warcraft 3's hero system, which in turn led to the development of the MOBA genre we know today. There's an inherent desire in some people to have minions do their bidding, a trend that RTS games capitalized on. In more recent years, however, the genre has been trying to shed this aspect in favor of smaller unit scales, much to the annoyance of fans. There's a very good reason why all these mobile games flaunt that they can have 9,999 units on the screen. In fact, real-time strategy stemmed from a desire for a more active and action-oriented version of Civilization and other strategy games of the 90s. We've kind of forgotten that link over time, describing real-time strategy as a single standalone genre when most new players approach the genre in a similar way to Civilization or Stellaris. Therefore, I think it's way more interesting to ask that if a better name for the genre would be Action 4X. In the same way that ARPGs are RPGs, which focus a lot more on action than combat, than relatively boring things like reading skills and complicated storylines. Heretical ideas aside, I can definitely see some kind of ARPG that focuses on you controlling minions. So instead of just being a normal person gaining godlike powers, how about a game that lets you play as a god living through your minions? You could, for example, specialize in a single powerful minion that devours your other minions because she loves being your minion that much. Or you could specialize in having 8 bloodthirsty squirrels ripping and tearing their way through legions of undead. By the way, quick update regarding my Command & Conquer 4 rewrite series. Basically, I lost all of the good stuff to a power outage. I wasn't that far along, but I might just do a video script instead of just writing a full script for the campaign, because that would be a bit too much work on my end. In any case, if you have any ideas about what might revitalize the genre, comment them down below, because I think we need as much discussion on the topic as we can.